And we're taking our democracy back one congressional district at a time. On the line with us is Jamie McLeod Skinner. She is running for the United States House of Representatives from Oregon's 5th District. Her opponent is the Republican Lori Chavez DeRemer. And Jamie for, J-A-M-I-E, Jamie for F-O-R, Oregon.com is the website. Jamie for Oregon is also the Twitter handle. And Jamie, welcome back to the program. It's been a while since we spoke. For those Oregonians who might be listening, and then I want to take this to a little larger frame, but for Oregonians who may be listening who may not have yet voted, Louise and I both voted yesterday for you, among others. Or day before you? No, it was day before yesterday. But in any case, for any Oregonians who might not have voted, do you want to give us just a quick summary of who you are, what your campaign is, and if you wish, what you're campaigning against?
Yeah, so this is, as so many people know, such a critically important election cycle. It's really about helping working families rebound from the COVID economy, addressing those challenges and safety challenges, whether it's public safety, whether it is wildfires, which we're experiencing here in Oregon. It's protecting our fundamental personal freedoms and our rights, including our right to access abortion, and protecting our democracy. I mean, your last segment talked about how we're either being pit against each other in the sense of chaos or being brought together and building community. And we're really focused on building community. It is an evenly drawn district. So the newly drawn 5th Congressional District, over half it's new, and it now extends from the Selwood Bridge in southern Portland down into Central Oregon to Sun River. And it went from leaning Democrat to really a toss-up. So one of the most evenly drawn races in the country. And what we're up against is extremism. My opponent was initially very candid and honest about her extremism, and since then because there was such a pushback, has now reframed so much. But the bottom line is she would vote to ban abortion before a woman knows she's pregnant. She has been an apologist for election deniers. She wants to end government-funded health care. That includes Medicare and Medicaid and the VA system. And so all of these steps would be so regressive and really hurt working families, all those folks who are really struggling. We need to help people out and move forward instead of punishing people and furthering the divide that's among us right now.
Yeah, amen. I don't get how any Oregonian who is informed about the issues. Why is this a choice? Why is this a difficult decision to make? We're talking with Jamie McLeod Skinner. JamieForOregon.com is the website if you want to check it out. Jamie, Louise and I live here, and we turn on the TV and we're just buried in ads, particularly in the gubernatorial race, where we've got 2 Oregon billionaires who were first supporting an independent to pull a former Democrat to pull votes away from Tina Kotek, who's running for governor on the Democratic ticket. And then when looked like that wasn't going to work, then they just started pouring millions into the campaign of the Republican candidate. And that's all I'm seeing on TV right now. What is going on with dark money and big money in Oregon politics?
Well, they're trying to divide us. They're trying to get us to believe the lies they're spewing, and it works for some, and other folks are pushing back on it. It's really interesting in my race in particular. I've actually outraised my opponent 2-to-1 in small dollar contributions. I actually don't take corporate PAC money. And so some of the money pouring in are those organizations who are afraid of good ideas moving forward. So the things we've been talking about are lowering prescription drug prices and helping to address the climate crisis, helping to protect our access to abortion and fundamental personal freedoms. There's a tremendous pushback on that. And so my opponent, who's a millionaire and who's committed to protecting the Trump tax cuts, as opposed to what I'm talking about is, the child tax credits that we should be extending, because that got millions of Americans out of poverty and out of debt. So we're having that huge divide right now of mega money pouring in to races like mine, attacking and making ridiculous claims. I'm really proud that Oregonians have been pushed back. I was attacked on, and this is Democrats across the country have been attacked on public safety issues. Well, the former chief of police in Bend did an ad for us and pushed back on that. He's supporting me and called it just ridiculous. And then also called out my opponent for her support of the January 6th insurrectionists even
Whoa.
after they attacked Capitol Police. Yeah, I mean, again, we've got in my race and in the other races in Oregon as well, there was just recently an ad, and recently a news article in Huffington Post that talked about how they're essentially election deniers, but when they got pushback and initially saying that directly a couple months ago, they're rewording it now. They haven't, if you listen, they're not changing where they stand, but they are essentially denying their own extremism. And this is an election of community versus chaos. And the chaos piece of pitting us against each other is what our opponents are trying to do.
What are your thoughts on how we can best deal with this, I call it a crisis, caused by the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision that billionaires and out-of-state big money groups and even corporations, and for that matter, even foreign corporations and foreign billionaires, can come into a state like Oregon and just buy elections. How do we deal with this?
We've got to find a solution. We've got to push back on it. So ending Citizens United, whether it takes a constitutional amendment, where there's steps that we can take in terms of laws to block and limit and restrict, control the flood of money going into politics. That's why I don't take corporate PAC money, because I believe in accountability to voters, but it comes down to voters standing up and reclaiming our democracy. But I'll say, we frankly saw this in the primary as well, where there was a bunch of money flooding in, and our ground game responded. And so we've got a tremendous ground game. Oregonians are pushing back on these attacks. And so we'll see, election day where voters end up coming out. But it's really this pitting the sense of fear and drumming up fear and pitting us against each other versus Oregonians sticking together across the political divide to push back on these kind of attacks. Because a lot of folks are recognizing this is not just an attack on this elections, it's really an attack on our democracy.
We're talking with Jamie McLeod Skinner, JamieForOregon.com, the website, and also the Twitter handle. Jamie, talking about this in the context of an attack on democracy, a lot of people, this kind of just flies over their heads. We were, during the first hour of the program, kind of brainstorming collectively, me and my callers, about what, essentially, if we lose our democracy, if we embrace fascism, what will that look like? And I was suggesting things like, well, if you don't discuss politics, and if you're white in America, probably it won't look like much of a problem. But if you are a person of color, if you are a gender minority, if you're LGBTQ, part of that spectrum, if you are somebody who is speaking out or politically active against the Republicans, basically, you could lose your job. You could be targeted. You could be harassed. You could have your house burned down. I mean, these are all the kinds of things that just typically happen when countries flip fascist. When Orban took over Hungary, his followers went down to the gypsy part of town, the Roma. Gypsy is now kind of a slur, but it's a word everybody understands. They went to that part of town with torches and threatened to burn them out. How do you see? What do you see as the danger? What is your most dystopian vision here that we have to avoid?
Well, it's attacks on people of color, indigenous people, like you're saying, LGBTQ folks, but it's also an attack, socioeconomic attack. And that's where some folks are getting sucked up into the arguments. Lower income white folks are getting sucked up to the arguments, but are also, frankly, under attack right now. In my race, for example, I'm running against someone who wants to defund the Department of Education, who's against government-funded healthcare, and that includes the VA system, Medicare, Medicaid. That would throw millions of Oregonians, forget about how many Americans, just out on the street, and it would stir and raise the poverty level. So this is really an attack on the vast majority of Americans across this racial spectrum, across political spectrum, and that's really what's at stake here. Yeah. But the intimidation and the bullying is really frightening. I began my public service career over in Bosnia and Kosovo after the war, and it was just devastating. And my job was to help rebuild schools and hospitals. And I remember then seeing the devastation, and I never thought we could see that here. But that sense of a civil war and pitting us against each other, it was frightening. And some of my colleagues who said that they, even just a week before the war started, They were sitting around in a cafe with all the different, political ethnic groups that ended up at each other's throats were friends, and they were talking about saying it could never happen here, and it happened. That's really what's at risk right now because of this divisive pitting us against each other. And I'll tell you, because I live in rural Central Oregon, and my wife and I live in a rural area where there are not a lot of Democrats, and we get along great with our neighbors. Those relationships they're intact, and we really, that's the hope for me. Yeah. The negative is people attacking each other, and we're seeing some of that happen right now. I mean, I've gotten death threats in races I've run, and that's the frightening side of it. But if we really lean into, we can do this, we can work together. People want solutions, and people are struggling right now. And so we have Republicans who are using that to foment fear and attacks on each other, rather than the fact that saying, hey, we just came through a global pandemic. Of course, we're in a tough time, but we're actually much better than other countries, and we have to work through this time together. But working together to work through the challenge that we're facing, that's the work that needs to be done. And if people instead respond to the fear and pit against each other, we're all in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, amen. Jamie McLeod Skinner, candidate for Congress from Oregon's 5th District. The website is Jamie, Jamie, for Oregon, JamieForOregon.com. And Jamie for Oregon is the Twitter handle. And Jamie, I wish you the very best. I totally support your candidacy. I voted for you, and I hope that you will be representing our state.
Thank you so much. And folks can go to JamieForOregon.com and donate and also volunteer.
There you go. Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks, Thom.